3 summers ago, I stopped fertilizing a strip of my back lawn entirely. No nitrogen, nothing. By August, it was greener than the section I was still feeding. The difference wasn't luck. It was one plant I'd seeded into that strip on purpose. The same plant every groundskeeper used for 50 years, before the lawn chemical industry taught everyone to poison it. After the war, they had a weed killer that couldn't spare it, so they rebranded it as the enemy. It works so well that most people today have never even heard of it. I'm going to show you what it is, how it feeds your grass, and the exact soil temperature to overseed it so it actually takes. Don't skip that part. The timing is the whole game. Here's the thing. The story I just told you isn't a hunch. It's documented, and the authority behind it isn't some shadowy nobody. It's the post-apocalyptic lawn chemical industry, built almost overnight around a single new product. That product was 2,4-D, the first selective broadleaf herbicide sold to homeowners. It came out of wartime plant hormone research and hit American garages around 1945 to 1947. Now, before any of that, white clover wasn't a weed. It was a selling point. Premium lawn seed was judged partly by how much clover was in the bag. Seed houses like O.M. Scott & Sons sold clover seed by the pound, on purpose, because it made the grass greener and thicker. Groundskeepers seeded it deliberately. Clover in the mix was a mark of quality. That's not opinion. That's what the old seed catalogs say in plain print. Then 2,4-D arrived, and everything flipped. Here's the problem the industry ran into. 2,4-D kills broadleaf plants and leaves grass standing. Clover is a broadleaf legume, not a grass. So the new miracle spray couldn't tell the difference between a dandelion and the clover people had been paying extra for. It killed both. Think about what that meant. You can't sell a one-shot weed killer as the answer to a perfect lawn if the best lawns are full of a plant your spray destroys. So clover had to go. Not because it hurt anything, because it was in the way of the product. And here's what it cost you. Clover was pulling 1 to 3 pounds of free nitrogen into every 1,000 square feet of lawn, every single year. The day it got branded a weed, that free nitrogen disappeared, and homeowners got locked onto a treadmill. Buy fertilizer to feed the grass. Buy herbicide to keep the clover out. Repeat. $200 to $300 a year, every year, for a plant that used to do both jobs for nothing. So let me tell you exactly what that plant is. White clover. Trifolium repens. Dutch white clover if you want the full name on it. And there's a modern, low-growing version of it called microclover that I'll get to in a minute, because that one changes everything. But the core of it is white clover. The same plant your grandfather's groundskeeper seeded into every lawn he touched, and did it on purpose, and charged extra for the privilege. Here's the thing most people my age don't even realize. For about 50 years, clover wasn't a weed. It was the mark of a quality lawn. The groundskeepers who ran the estate lawns, the golf course turf, the park grounds. They built clover right into the mix because they understood something the spray companies later spent millions getting you to forget. A little clover in the turf meant the grass took care of itself. It stayed green when everything around it browned out. It didn't need a tanker truck of nitrogen rolling up every 6 weeks. That was the secret ingredient, and it sat right there in the seed bag for half a century. Then, sometime in the 1950s, it quietly disappeared from those bags. And within one generation, people went from paying extra to have it, to spraying poison to kill it. Same plant. Nothing about the plant changed. Only the story did. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Because once you understand how clover actually works, you understand why the industry could rebrand it, but could never actually make it stop working. They changed the word. They couldn't change the biology. Clover is a legume, and legumes do something grass simply cannot do. Down on the roots of every clover plant, there's a partnership going on with a bacteria called rhizobia. The clover root grows little swollen bumps. Turf people call them nodules. And inside those nodules, the bacteria live. What they do in there is the whole trick. They pull nitrogen straight out of the air. The air around us is about 78% nitrogen gas, but grass can't touch it. Grass can't use nitrogen from the air any more than you can drink seawater. It has to have nitrogen in a form it can absorb through the roots. That's what fertilizer is. Nitrogen in a usable form, which is why you keep buying it. The rhizobiobacteria in clover roots take that useless atmospheric nitrogen and convert it into ammonium. Plant-available nitrogen. The exact form your grass has been starving for. And here's the part the spray companies never wanted, sitting in the front of your mind. The clover doesn't keep it all. It leaks. As those roots work and as old roots die back and break down, that fixed nitrogen bleeds out into the surrounding soil, right into the root zone where your grass is reaching for it. The clover is fertilizing the grass next to it. For free. Around the clock. All season long. Let me give you the math because the numbers are what got me. A healthy stand of white clover fixes somewhere between 50 and 150 pounds of nitrogen per acre per year. Scale that down to the size most of us actually deal with, and you're looking at roughly 1 to 3 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet every year, dropped into your soil without you lifting a finger or opening your wallet. Now think about a standard synthetic program. Most of those run about 3 to 4 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet across a whole season, split into 4 or 5 applications you pay for and haul out and spread. Clover is quietly handing you a meaningful chunk of that whole program for nothing. And that's the part that should make you a little angry, honestly. You can ban a word. You can run an ad campaign. You can put clover on the weed list and print it right there on the herbicide label. But you cannot ban a bacterium. The rhizobia never read the memo. The whole 50 years they spent teaching people to poison clover. The biology never stopped working for the people who knew to leave it alone. That's why this is the kind of thing you don't find in the standard advice columns. The mechanism was never in question. It was just inconvenient. Now let me bring it back to that strip in my own back lawn, because this is exactly why it outperformed the section I was still feeding. 2 reasons, and they both come straight out of how clover works. First, the nitrogen delivery. When you put down synthetic fertilizer, you get a flush. The grass greens up hard for a couple weeks. Then it fades, and you're chasing it again with the next application. Flush and fade, flush and fade. Most homeowners are riding that roller coaster all summer and they think that's just how lawns are. Clover doesn't work that way. Clover trickles. It feeds a steady, low, constant supply of nitrogen into the soil day after day, week after week, with no spike and no crash. So the clover strip never had the slump. It just sat there green while the fed section peaked and sagged, depending on how recently I'd thrown down fertilizer. Second reason, and this one matters even more down here in Texas in August: water. Clover puts down a deep taproot. Your grass roots, even good Bermuda, live mostly in the top few inches of soil. Clover reaches down well past that, into moisture the grass can't get to. So when the heat came on and the top of the soil baked out, the clover was still pulling water from below and staying green, and it was keeping the soil around it cooler and shaded. That strip held its color through the worst of August, while the fed section, with all its expensive nitrogen, went pale and limp between waterings. It wasn't luck. A clover lawn feeds itself and waters itself a little deeper than a pure grass lawn can. There's more it does, too. That low canopy of clover leaves shades the soil surface, and bare, sunny soil is exactly where crabgrass and other weed seeds wait to germinate. Shade them out and you choke a lot of those weeds before they start. The flowers, if you let them bloom, feed the bees and every other pollinator that comes through. And the whole time, you've eliminated the need for synthetic nitrogen on that turf. Think about what that adds up to. A lawn that feeds itself, waters itself a little deeper, and crowds out its own weeds is a lawn that stops buying product. And a lawn that stops buying product is exactly the lawn nobody in that industry had any reason to sell you. Now, here's the layer even most of the folks who already know about clover never got told. Because some of you are sitting there thinking, Larry, I know about clover. My neighbor's got it, and it's clumpy and lumpy and it flowers everywhere and it looks like a mess. I hear you. And for old-fashioned tall white clover, you're not entirely wrong. But that's not the only option anymore. And this is where microclover comes in. Microclover is white clover that's been selected over generations for a much smaller leaf and a much lower, tighter growth habit. It doesn't clump up into those big round patches. Under regular mowing, it actually shrinks its leaf size and weaves itself down into the turf, filling in between the grass blades instead of sitting on top in lumps. From standing height, you genuinely cannot tell it's there. It just reads as a thick, uniform, deep green lawn. Same nitrogen-fixing engine underneath. Same rhizobia, same free fertilizer. But it disappears into the grass instead of fighting it. And the flowering, which is the other big objection people have, you control that with the mower. Clover flowers on a stem that rises above the leaves. Keep up a regular mowing schedule and you simply clip those flower stems off before they ever open. No blooms, no bees if you don't want them. No white flowered look, just green. Let it grow tall and it'll flower. Mow it on schedule and it won't. You're in charge of which lawn you get. The ratio is the other thing people get wrong. You are not planting a clover field. You are seeding a small percentage of clover into a grass lawn. We're talking roughly 5 to 10% clover by seed weight in the mix. That's it. A little goes a very long way because each plant is fixing nitrogen for the grass all around it. Seed it too heavy and it does start to take over and look like clover. Keep it in that 5 to 10% range, and it stays a supporting player doing the feeding from underneath while the grass stays the star. And it renews itself. White clover spreads by little creeping stems along the ground, and if you let a few flowers go to seed at the end of the season, it reseeds itself right back into any thin spots. So unlike a bag of fertilizer that's gone the day you spread it, this is a system that maintains itself and even repairs itself year after year with no reorder. It also doesn't care what kind of grass you've got. This is the part that surprised me, working both kinds of turf the way I have. Clover pairs with cool season lawns, your Kentucky bluegrass, your fescues, the grasses I grew up on in Iowa. And it pairs just fine with warm season turf too, including the Bermuda most of us run down here in Texas. The grass species barely matters. The clover is doing chemistry in the soil. It'll feed bluegrass in Ohio and Bermuda in Dallas, with the same bacteria doing the same job in the root zone. So when somebody tells you they already know all about clover, ask them if they've ever heard the word microclover. Most of them haven't, and that's not an accident. Even after clover slipped back into the conversation as a so-called eco-friendly lawn idea, the version that actually solves every objection people have. The small leaf, the no-clump habit, the mow-controlled flowering, the precise seed ratio, that part stayed buried, because nobody anywhere makes $1 off a lawn that quietly feeds itself and never needs another bag of anything. The plant that does all of this was erased from the seed bag on purpose, and the improved version of it was kept just as quiet for exactly the same reason. Now, before we keep going, I want to tell you about something. If everything I just showed you is clicking, if you're starting to realize that everything you were told about clover was backwards, then you already understand the bigger idea behind my book, Larry's 30-Day Weed Kill Protocol. Chapter 1 is called Why Everything You Know About Weeds is Wrong, and it does to your whole lawn what this video just did to clover. It reframes the weed as a soil problem, not an enemy to poison. If you're exhausted by the cycle, tired of being sold the next bottle, this is a permanent fix, not another tip. It's $17 at larrysgardenbooks.com. If you're watching on your TV, grab your phone and point it at the QR code on screen. Take your time finding it. No rush. I'll be right here. On your phone or laptop, the link's in the description. All right, let's get into the why. Here's the thing about 2,4-D. It's a selective broadleaf herbicide. That means it kills broadleaf plants and leaves the grass blades standing. And clover is a broadleaf legume, not a grass. So the chemistry is brutally simple. 2,4-D cannot spare clover. It was never able to. The moment you spray it, the clover dies right alongside the dandelions. Now put yourself in the shoes of the people selling that spray after the war. They had a product that promised a flawless, one-shot lawn. But the best lawns in America still had clover seeded right into them. You can't sell a miracle weed killer that kills the thing in the premium seed mix. So the answer wasn't to fix the spray. The answer was to reclassify the plant. Clover went from a mark of quality to a weed in the public mind, almost overnight. That's not an agronomic decision. That's a marketing decision. The biology didn't change. The label on the bag changed. And look at what that decision built. A clover-free lawn can't make its own nitrogen anymore, so now you have to buy it. 3-4 pounds per 1,000 square feet, every season, in a bag. Then, because clover seed is still in the soil and still wants to come back, you have to buy the herbicide to keep killing it. That's 2 recurring purchases created out of 1 removed plant. Synthetic nitrogen to replace the job clover did for free, and broadleaf weed control to make sure clover never does that job again. Year after year. That's the engine. I want to be honest with you. There's a real argument on the other side, and I'm not going to dismiss it. Clover blooms. And those blooms draw honeybees. So if you're walking barefoot, you'll want to keep it mowed. It doesn't give you that pure, single-species stripe that the magazines sold as the ideal lawn. The post-war marketing pushed the flawless monoculture as a status symbol, and a lot of people genuinely want that look. Fair enough. But understand what it cost you. You spent decades buying nitrogen and decades buying weed control to replace one plant that quietly supplied both. They didn't bury clover because it hurt your lawn. They buried it because a lawn that feeds itself doesn't need them. That's the whole story. Now here's the part the hook promised you, the one number that decides whether any of this works. The timing. You can buy the right seed, scratch it in perfect, and still get nothing if you put it down at the wrong soil temperature. So here's the math. You overseed white clover or microclover when your soil temperature is steadily at or above 55 degrees and climbing towards 60. And I mean measured at 2 inches deep with a soil probe, not guessed off the calendar. Below 55, that seed just sits there and rots. Above the mid-80s in deep summer heat, it struggles to establish. So you've got 2 windows. Spring, once the nights stop freezing, or early fall, as the summer heat breaks. Those are your shots. Trust me on this one. Get a soil temperature probe and read the dirt, not the date on the wall. Now the rate. For a pure clover stand, you're putting down about 2 to 3 pounds per 1,000 square feet. If you're mixing it into existing turf the way I did in that backstrip, you only need 1/4 to 1/2 pound per 1,000. That's it. It goes a long way. Buy seed that's already rhizobium inoculated. That's the coating that carries the bacteria. Because without those bacteria, there's no nodules, no nitrogen fixation, and you've got a pretty plant doing nothing. Scratch or rake the surface first so you get real seed-to-soil contact, and keep that top inch moist through the 7 to 14-day germination window. Don't let it dry out and don't drown it. That exact temperature number was never printed on a seed bag, because by the time you were buying seed, clover had been erased from the bag completely. Before I let you go, now you've got the number that was never on the bag. If you want the rest of the system, that's Chapter 5 in Larry's 30-day weed kill protocol. It's called the barrier system, and it covers living mulch, clover, and creeping thyme. with the exact seeding rates that turn a lawn into something that suppresses weeds and feeds itself at the same time. 88 pages, no fluff, just the protocol start to finish. It's a permanent fix instead of another tip. It gets you off the treadmill for good. Head to larrysgardenbooks.com. If you're on the TV, go ahead and aim your phone at the QR code on screen. Take a second to dig it out of your pocket. I'll wait. If you're on your phone already, the link's sitting right in the description. All right, here's the takeaway. Clover was the Groundskeepers' free nitrogen engine for 50 years, until a post-war spray that couldn't spare it got it rebranded as a weed, and the bacteria on its roots never stopped working the whole time. Now you know how to put a self-feeding lawn back together, and you can start this spring or this fall the second your soil hits 55 degrees. This is the same kind of buried knowledge as pre-emergent timing, which the calendar gets wrong every single year. There's a natural one Dr. Nick Christians up at Iowa State proved out, and I'll walk you through that window in another video. Go check your lawn. You'll see what I mean. I'll see you in the next one.